Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Future of Biz Tech. I'm your host, JC Granger. I have another fantastic guest with me on the show today. Listen, if you end up liking this episode, please show your love and appreciation by following this podcast wherever you're listening and, give it that 5-star review, preferably with some nice comments in there, right? Because that is how techies like you and I find really cool podcasts like this. And today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Richard Hollis, who's the founder and CEO of Risk Crew. Richard, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what does Risk Crew do?
Well, first of all, JC, thank you. Thank you for having me. Big fan of the podcast. Where do I start? So I'm a cybersecurity professional for over 25, 30 years now. I'm a founder of a company called Risk Crew. We're a sort of a product agnostic consultancy located that has got a portfolio of cybersecurity risk management solutions. We were founded on the principle, JC, of the idea that cybersecurity is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a secure computer. So what's the game? The game is to identify, minimize, and manage the threats to your risk appetite, the appetite that you have for doing business online. So we work with businesses to identify that risk appetite, how much could you lose in the event that you had a breach, define a strategy, and then work everything from their policies, their procedures, their strategies, and deliver things like code reviews of their critical applications, looking at the vendors, the software, the hardware that they're actually using for security vulnerabilities, duplicating how hackers would hack into their systems and giving them, cost-effective ways to remediate those vulnerabilities. So it's a process organization. We believe that that cybersecurity is a process, in fact, not a product. And so we come at the angle that the cybersecurity industry is a little behind, on, well, it's always behind, but I'd love to talk about that, but that's who I am and that's what we do. We've been in business for well over 10 years, and every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the cybersecurity threat landscape. So it's a lot of fun, exciting time. It's a great time to be in my industry.
Well, the audience might understand this too, based on what you said your company is. But we talked about before, you're kind of a unicorn for me right now because I typically interview C-level execs at like software companies, right? Like product. And like you said, you're product agnostic. And why I wanted to have you on specifically is because with the advent and not even advent, I would say just with the exponential increase of intelligence for AI specifically. When I saw you come across my desk, so to speak, right, I think we need to have a really big conversation about the thing that most people really aren't thinking about, right? And we talked about it. Most people can't wrap their head around the concept of exponential, right? Because the brain really does have its limits, right? When it starts imagining things. And so I want to hear your take on what kind of fears or hopes do you have when it comes to how AI is going to affect cybersecurity? It's a cat and mouse game, right? So you're going to have the bad actors using AI to try to fool a lot of systems on a very large scale, but we'll also have the people using AI to try to catch them. So where do you see, how do you see this playing out, and what are you seeing right now?
Okay. The best place to start there is to look at our past. Okay, new technology comes on the horizon, and our failure in cybersecurity has been to not understand the cybersecurity ramifications of new technology or new waves of technology as they come. So, the internet comes along, we forgot about security concepts, the idea of breaching systems. So suddenly internet security meant a firewall. Then we go to Wi-Fi, and then we go to the cloud, and then we go, there's always, every 3 to 5 years, there's a wave of technology comes. But here's the problem. Cybersecurity is always a bolt-on to that technology. We do not build secure by design, nor do we consider it in any technology that comes on the horizon. So where I come from is a long history of, we forgot security. Technology was cool. It's increased productivity, it's increased efficiency, but suddenly we forgot that code that application runs on, that software as a service runs on, is insecure. Then we lose data, and it's So we call it a bolt-on. Cybersecurity has always been a bolt-on to the technology industry. All right, so suddenly AI. AI is probably a game changer. I felt that way in terms of the cybersecurity threat landscape when nation states started to hack into our systems. There's no way that small businesses or even large businesses could compete against a nation state putting its resources to breaching your system. All right, now suddenly that kind of capability, the China, the NSA, France, the UK, being able to look at a business and breach that system. That kind of power now is going to be available to any yin yang out there who can get his hands on a small AI. All right, so AI comes along and it changes the threat landscape considerably. It'll be unrecognizable. It's like, you remember that, what was it, Crocodile Dundee, where they're walking across the park with his girlfriend, and some guy comes out and pulls a knife and says, "Give me your wallet," and he just smiles and she says, "What? Give him your wallet. He's got a knife." And he said, "No, that's not a knife. This is a knife," and pulls out that huge. That's what AI is to the cybersecurity threat landscape. It dwarfs anything in terms of a threat. Now we are extremely vulnerable, JC, right now because we're still playing catch up. We're still playing catch up on, anti-malware that doesn't work, firewalls that let through traffic that it shouldn't. So we have not, it's not like we've got a history of getting better. Cybersecurity to us has been a product, We want to buy a product.
Yeah, but how do companies or nations protect themselves with a bolt-on? Because see, a bolt-on might have been fine with the speed and the speed of which the bad actors could act, right? They could only come up with new code every so often to try to come up with something. They could only implement it to so many systems in one shot. It gives you time. You get hit once and you're like, oh, okay, that hurt. Let's patch that, right? And that speed would go back and forth. But with AI, it gives a bad actor the ability to hit you everywhere all the time, without stopping, while also changing the method in real time. How
Correct.
on earth do we possibly work with that with a bolt-on strategy?
You're right, and which is why I'm extremely dismal about the future of cybersecurity when the present and the past have always been a step behind. So along comes something, like you said, that's always on, everywhere, at all times. And they're also the powerful, and it'll shrink the attack time, because when a typical hacker was looking at a system to break in, there was a reconnaissance time. He had to understand what kind of firewall does this business have, what kind of antivirus can I get this, and do some reconnaissance to understand the vulnerabilities and then exploit those vulnerabilities. An AI tool will just look at the products and come and automatically print out a list of the vulnerabilities known with that product and automatically apply a tool. So it's like it's a leap into hyperspace for the attack time itself. And here's the thing, JC, is this is not new. You and I are talking about it when real AI attacks were happening at least a year and a half, 2 years ago. We're talking about it now because of Chat GPT and Bard and these things that the consumers are talking about. Anybody working with AI and machine learning technology in a cyberspace, in a hacking space, has had their tools set out and running for at least 18 months. So we're a step behind yet again.
Yeah, and I think the scary thing that I was thinking about is, I kind of had this analogy in my head. I don't know if you've watched Game of Thrones, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but the dragons, having the dragon egg was like this really prized thing, because that dragon egg, although it's small and it can't do anything right now, but if you keep that egg and it hatches, you have a dragon. It's a baby one, but it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually you have it. And what I see is that the problem with AI is that although the average person or even a hacker usually doesn't have access to the most advanced hacking AI, they don't need it. They just need the egg, right? They just need the base coding of a good AI system, because they will teach it and it will grow and it'll get better and smarter over time. And the problem is, eggs are really easy to come by now. And that's the analogy that's in my head. And that's what kind of scares me, is that even an average hacker doesn't need to have the best system, because it's been hard for them to attain it, right? Even in that world, in that black hat world, you had to have a lot of money, or you had to know the right people. And now you don't need either one of those, right? You can have a base foundation, a little bit of startup capital for your own server or cloud or whatnot, right? and then just enough time to sit there and teach it things the way you mold it. And then eventually within a few months, you have a dragon, like a big one, right? And I think that is what kind of scares me about this, because I think the only thing that might save us is if everyone can take everyone out, right? It's like nuclear Holocaust style, right? I think it becomes what's the term when no one fires a nukes because everybody would fire
Mutual
the nukes?
destruction.
Yeah. Mutually assured destruction, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I think the only thing that might save us as a nation state, for example, and companies, is that if everyone had someone that could attack someone else, that nobody does it, because then everybody would do it and nobody wins, right? That's the only thing that's in my head, but it's very nihilistic, and I don't like to be nihilistic. I want to be hopeful. So I guess my question to you is this: do you see the ability, like where do you see AI as far as its ability to detect and defend against other AI? How are you guys at Risk Crew or the industry in general looking at AI, how to harness it to be on your side?
Yeah, we're using it. Let's go back to my analogy that we're a step behind, and we're a step behind in this AI. You're right. There's dragon eggs out there. There's live dragons, and those dragons are programmed to, not breathe fire, but they'll get worse with every generation. So you're right. And remember, I said that we're always a step behind, whether that's technology or the actors today, and we are programmed then to be reactive in our industry. All right. So it's like they bring a knife, we bring a gun. They bring a machine gun, Sean, we've got to bring a howitzer. We've got to. It's a natural escalation. You're absolutely right to feel is a strategy of mutually assured destruction effective. And I tell you, it's the only one that I know that works now. Because one, nation states use it. You don't attack a nation state without getting, and you know what other industry uses it? You'll be surprised to hear. The online adult entertainment industry, who has always embraced technology. And and there are a lot of people who don't like what these people provide as content, and for religious or moral purposes, and there are organized hacker groups that take them out. But that's a business that'll turn around, identify where your attack is coming from, and take you off the face of the internet. All right, they get proactive. You know who else does that as a nation state? Israel does that. They're proactive, and they in fact have a history of coming up with the best security products because they're proactive in nature.
I have heard Israel is a hotbed for security.
They are. They gave us and we used to talk about intrusion detection. They came up with intrusion prevention. If somebody starts scanning your firewall, identify and shut that down. So we have to get proactive. You're absolutely right. And the only history of success we've had is in those pockets that understand that the internet is a war zone, and you better come well armed, or you're going to be a casualty of war. And yes, nation states get that. And on a nation state level, nation state to nation state, we will achieve mutually assured destruction, but not when it comes to cyber criminal gangs against small to medium businesses and banks who are using AI and rolling in the big guns. You're absolutely right. Anybody can have a dragon. Now, and in terms of the best defensive strategy that we recommend is a proactive, let's start making our own dragons here. And at the end of the day, the internet is not governed. There's no right, there's no wrong. There's a couple federal agencies that chase pedophiles, but technically you can launch a denial of service attack at an IP that's doing reconnaissance of your business with no repercussions whatsoever. And there's no international treaties that allow us to extradite hackers or hacker groups. No, anything goes on the internet. So we are moving to, if we're not proactive, we will be a casualty. So that's what I see AI. I see that we need to start using it, not just for defensive purposes, because we'll always be a step ahead, but take the next step and be offensive in nature, and start to kill these dragons in their eggs before they're hatched and they wreak havoc on our businesses.
That's a good point. Given the exponential nature and where this is probably headed, do you see what is still somewhat a small cybersecurity industry? Do you see it exploding out of necessity? Do you see it staying small and just consolidating with mergers? Where do you see cybersecurity as an industry going, knowing that this wave is coming?
Well, I don't see the industry from the outside. I see it from the inside. I'm inside it, and it seems pretty big here. And there's 20 leaders, there's 20 industries leaders out there with big names that own the predominantly the large part of the market. Okay, and my concern is that the products these industry leaders put out are not fit for purpose. They're not working. And they're making a lot of money. So in terms of, yes, there's an explosion. But for me, I think there's an explosion. I think the growth needs to be in non-product, product vendors. Products right now are part of the problem. They're not part of the solution. Products right now, cybersecurity products are the most popular venue for hackers to come in because they're trusted products. So and they're not built securely. These big names putting out firewalls and these things that we're using in SIMs, it's not like they've been designed securely and have secure code. They have the same vulnerabilities that any software as a service at GitHub or Salesforce or that anybody else is putting their information assets in. But they're cybersecurity products, so they're trusted. They're trusted by name, which makes them even more overlooked. We want to put in a firewall by so-and-so, check a box and say, that's it, we're secure. And we overlook that. Anyway, so my issue, or where I see the most growth is needed, is in an AI strategy, is in formulating strategy to keep businesses inside the risk appetite and keep them alive on the warfield. But the products, the things that we're struggling with right now, look at ransomware. It's the best idea. Ransomware is what? It's malware. Do you know anybody that doesn't have anti-malware on their device? Do you know anybody? And yet we don't talk about it. Businesses are getting ransomware and they're being put out of business. And nobody asks, well, geez, ransomware is malware. We're running malware. Our malware's no good. That's the problem. People get ransomware because the malware is terrible. The malware is not, it's running signatures that were designed 5-10 years ago. So, seriously, it's odd. That's the greatest example how we're always late. Our hair's on fire about ransomware, and we don't even bring up the fact that, hey, maybe our malware's poor, and that's why we're getting this ransomware. Same idea as what I'm looking at is that we need to take it beyond product. We need to take it, and AI is going to push us there because AI will make product obsolete, as far as I'm concerned. There won't be a defendable network out there against an AI attack. So we got to start using gray matter, and we have to start using strategy. And I think the best thinkers out there in our industry are going to be an explosion in that. But until then, what we're going to see in the next 6 months, we're going to see a wave of breaches, and you're going to see product vendors shift and try to say, okay, you just need our new AI-driven firewall, and start to use AI in the title of their product, or our AI, our machine learning anti-malware solution. And they're going to stretch that product as to point it toward the AI problem, but it'll be as ineffective as it's been against malware and denial of service attacks and all these other attacks that we've had over the last 20 years. So I'm not optimistic that our vendors are going to get smart, because JC, you know what they need? They need R&D time. They come out with a new firewall. That's because they did R&D for the last 5 years, and they got to make money on that firewall. So they're going to keep it on the market for the next 2 years, even though it's no longer fit for purpose about the attacks and the threats out there. You got to get a return on your investment. So until there's money to be made, real money, our vendors are going to take products and leave them on the market until they get a return on them.
So with all that, then, what is Risk Crew doing as a consultancy firm to help your clients, right? Like, this is all doom and gloom, and it kind of should be a little bit, but then the question is, where's the light at the end of that tunnel? How is Risk Crew? What are you guys telling your clients? How are you guys trying to help this massive problem?
Well, we're trying to act, I don't know if you've been in therapy, JC, but you go to a therapist because you want to hear the truth. You want to lay out and say, hey, I'm using this, I'm using that, I'm still getting breached. All right.
I'm more of a heavy bag with boxing gloves therapy kind of guy.
Whatever works for you.
I've had very few problems I couldn't solve in 15 minutes on the heavy bag, but I understand your analogy. Go ahead.
you got to go. You got to go to somebody, to your priest, your therapist, your guru, your rabbi. You got to sit down and you got to say, all right, I can't get my head around cybersecurity. So what Risk Crew does is start with the strategy. What are you trying to protect? Why are you trying to protect it? What's going to happen to you if you fail? And come up with a risk out. Help you define your risk appetite for your business. For us, that's square one. How much? It's like going into Vegas. How much are you going to put in your pocket before you walk out? And you lose it, and you realize I can't lose any more than that. So we'll help you define that risk appetite for your business, how much you could possibly, and then work to you to identify all the threats that you're looking at in the way that you do business that exceed that risk appetite. A threat that would come in and put you out of business. To give you that, but that risk appetite, you have to understand how much you can't take to know how much you need to apply to that fight. So, and 99.9% of the businesses don't understand. It's like that Clint Eastwood adage, a man's got to know his limitations. Businesses don't understand their limitations when it comes to cybersecurity. So I'd like to think that's the first thing we do is give them strategy, show them their limitations. This breach would put you out of business, and say, that's fine. If you want to accept that risk, then go on, and help them realize and stay within their risk appetite by doing the basics. Like I said, we preach the gospel of process over product. It's strategy. Every attack, hackers have three attack vectors: people, process, and technology. But the whole industry is focused on technology, buying that piece of technology that will secure your business. And they neglect the other two proven attack vectors through people, like social engineering, or process for interrupting business continuity and disaster recovery, things like this. So it's just, that's what we try to do, is open up their vision and say, listen, what about these other two attack vectors? What about your people? What about your processes, your business processes that are just as vulnerable to disruption or cybercrime? So that's what we do, and we do them by knowledge transfer. We do them by, like I said, product agnostic consulting, where we go in and do things like risk assessments and policies and education and awareness training, and then looking at products and doing security assessments of products to make sure they're fit for purpose and they work, and that there's no vulnerabilities in the code, doing code reviews and fixing that, and making sure that everything's running as optimal. But the key thing I'd like to think is strategy, showing a business what they can't take, and just saying, and if that's it, then fine, welcome to the club, welcome to Vegas, but it just takes one bad roll and you could lose it all. And as long as you know that, then we feel our job is done. But to go back to your first question, the future doesn't look bright. There's a big storm cloud on the horizon called AI, and I'm not particularly enthused about the future because of the past and the present. So I'm looking for a new voice. I'm looking for the next generation who's going to come up and start to address and look at cybersecurity as a process, not a product. I'm hoping, and that for us, for a company like Risk Crew, is the answer or is the best foot forward toward an AI-driven attack.
Do you see like how Apple with their iPhone started taking some things more native built into the device? So for example, to read a QR code in the past, you had to download an app that could read QR codes. And in that app, you would, open it up, QR code, and it would go to something, which didn't take very well because most people don't want to have an app on their phone just to do a thing, and they don't want to open an app. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why doesn't Apple just make this native to the camera? And eventually they did. And so what I'm curious is, you talk about how the cybersecurity industry, like the product part of the industry, is they're steps behind, and they're going to keep products on the industry to get their ROI. Do you see a possibility of a blockbuster entertainment moment? And by that, what I mean is Blockbuster should have been Netflix, right? They had all the material, all the rights. They saw that the cloud existed. They could have been Netflix, and they didn't, and they weren't, and then they fought it, and then they died. And I'm wondering, do you see a possibility of cybersecurity products being an industry that dies because device manufacturers start integrating, like what you said, an AI, but that is envelops the entire everything in that device and all the files in it, right? So for example, what if Apple launched an AI that was native to the iPhone? Anything in the boundaries of that phone, it covered all of it, and in real time, right? As in, it was an egg. It was a dragon egg that sat there and got smarter and smarter. So this way, in real time, if it sees certain things coming through, it not only knows how to defend it, but it learns from that one in case it doesn't. And it gets to take the collective knowledge of all the phones and everything, right? Like, do you see, I guess, manufacturers or product or let's say device companies maybe overtaking cybersecurity product companies the way that Netflix overtook Blockbuster?
That's a great, JC. That's a really good analogy, and B, recommendation in terms of going forward. I love the way that you said, I saw this barcodes, but then eventually they did. And when you said that, I said, yeah, eventually when they made their money off the first iPhone, the next incarnation and the next incarnation comes. You know what I've come to see my industry, they say about the pharmaceutical industry, makes a lot of money off of treating the symptoms of sicknesses, the
There's
colds,
not a lot of
the
money in
flus.
cure. There's very little money in cure.
If you could take a pill and never take a common, have a cold again. And so there is so much money on treating the symptoms of cybersecurity problems, all right? And this is where the only thing that's going to get a vendor to change his way is that he's going to make money on it. So you're right, but you also mentioned a big player. If Apple moves in and suddenly gives us an AI smart defensive machine that we're using, first of all, that's going to come way down the line after you and I and many businesses have if anybody's still standing, great, we can have Apples. But the problem there is they're all going to be proprietary. Because if you're, then you've got Apple over here, you got Microsoft over here.
Who's going to care? I mean, why? I mean, I guess my point is, if they listen, they've always been a black box, right? And that's fine if you're the user, right? And then that's just phones. What about laptops, right? No, I guess my point is that if they were to start with phones, right, yep, and then people say, well, it's proprietary, we can't see it. Okay, I'm a consumer. Yep. I don't need to see it. I just need to buy the product so I know it's safe. It's providing that it is.
No, I'm saying you got a great.
And they don't need to make the money, and they don't need to make the money like McAfee or Norton Antivirus has to, because those are products they only make the money on that. They probably wouldn't mind investing the money because then more people just buy their devices. They make the money on the devices, on the cloud subscriptions, things like that. Sometimes it takes an industry that actually doesn't care, doesn't rely, I should say, on the full profits. It could be a loss leader for them if they're making up for it on people buying their devices and subscribing to their cloud subscriptions, things like that. So that's why when I say Apple, I mean, Google could be part of that as well. Or Samsung, for example, right? That's why I think they're most likely to come in, because they don't actually rely on the revenue from a standard subscription model that these cybersecurity companies that are keeping products out there on purpose to make their money back, because they're not innovating as fast. Apple would have every reason to innovate every single day because more people would keep buying their devices and their cloud stuff.
You're absolutely right. From an end user perspective, a B2C environment, that would be a huge leap forward. The problem in a business or a B2B environment is not everybody has an Apple, an iPhone, this, or, shares the same technology. So a business will invest in one technology. So the business would have to invest in Apple and give them all to their users, which, okay,
it would take a long time, but that was IBM's strategy. Remember, that's how they grew. They grew on the enterprise level B2B corporate side, convincing companies to completely transition over to their systems. And I mean, Apple, although it would take a while, I mean, they're positioned very well to do the same thing if they wanted to do that. They could knock out IBM and Microsoft within 5 years if they started today, in my opinion.
If they move it correctly, or else they could be a BlackBerry. In my industry, BlackBerry was no, yeah. And I had a BlackBerry, and I loved a BlackBerry, and I, encrypted calls. Are you kidding me? Why? Yeah, but there's, so it's got to be a smart move. It's got to be by 3 or 4 major players, and that's a move that would absolutely protect the end consumer, users, you and I, my mother, my father, my sister, my brother. That would make us in a safer place. Yes, but, and I go back to this but. First of all, remember we talked about nation states. And if you think Apple is free from nation state, intrusions, yeah. So suddenly then nation states own the cybersecurity landscape, which is, I guess, keeps out the riffraff and only keeps the professionals from getting into our devices. Okay, fine. It would eliminate a big problem. But businesses they have so much hybrid technology, so many different types of hardware and software and software as a service and so many people and from so many locations using different, technology has moved us, from to such a hybrid use of technology that I don't see a universal, even if it was Apple, even if it was Microsoft, I don't see a universal adaptation that would take us out of harm's way quick enough.
There shouldn't be shouldn't be. You don't want to have you can't have our eggs in one basket either way. But I do see maybe 2 to 3 players tops reaching that point.
Yep.
You got to think Apple has a company worth that is higher than about 90% of most countries' GDP.
Yep.
So if any company did have the resources on that level to combat nation states, it's Apple, right? And this is why I just think, I could see an IBM, Apple, Microsoft, competing, maybe Google in there, kind of thing. But I'm just curious. I wonder if this becomes the Netflix Blockbuster thing where Blockbuster should have been Netflix and, Norton antivirus should end up being the thing, but I don't think they will. I think their business model, the way you're explaining it, is going to die, and not a slow death. I think it's going to die a very exponential AI death, unfortunately.
Yes.
And that's not great.
Set you on fire death.
Yeah, and I'm not wishing for that, because I think here's the problem. I think that the time it'll take for product cybersecurity industry to go down will be faster than it will take anyone else to pick up the slack, including Apple or anyone else there. Even if they switch to this real-time device AI prevention model, which I think is a cool idea, right? I'm biased because I just had the idea, but even if that were to happen, that would take longer to implement. We'd have a massive gap, I think, in the middle, and I think that is very scary. From even just consumer side, people think that that nation states are targeting the governments, and they used to. But now they're realizing they can cause more havoc by going after 1,000 private companies. You know what happens if you take WordPress, for example, is the most attacked system on the planet, right? Because it's open source, so that, which is good and bad, right? And now most companies that have their website on WordPress, also usually the bigger companies, have things in there to help protect it, right? They're not easy targets. I mean, if anyone really, really wants to get to you, if they target you specifically, they can probably get in at some point. But it's kind of like how muggers work. Muggers don't go attack a guy who looks like he plays or that fights for the UFC. They're going to attack someone who looks like they can't really defend themselves, right? It's a target of opportunity. And that is like 90% of most attacks. So when you start seeing a nation state, a bad actor nation state, they can go after the government, but that's not an easy target. You know what is an easy target? The 10 million small businesses in America that are all working off of a WordPress site with the same login URL, the /admin, with the same username for admin, whatever. And then all they got to do, that's 2 out of 3 parts down right there. You put an AI in there just to run through standard passwords. You could hit if you could hit 400,000 small businesses and take their websites down tomorrow. That is massive, and they're all easy targets, and AI makes it to where you don't have to put in the labor for it, right? You don't have to take time or labor. You just have your dragon egg that goes in there and starts wreaking havoc and blowing fire all over the landscape. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night, because I'm a tech nerd, right? Like, that's the stuff I think about.
Watch it. That's the hoo-ha behind Instagram and China. Did you know Wired magazine did a great piece about a year and a half ago that they noticed that China was quietly buying up, and within 2 years they bought 37% of the encrypted VPN market. So over almost 40% of the VPNs out there in use by companies are in fact Chinese owned, Chinese national owned.
That is diabolical.
It is.
That's like white furry cat genius, right? They want to, Dr. Evil style.
And these are big names. And the other thing I wanted to remind you is, JC, is our vendors, the names that you mentioned, the big guys, the leaders, the people that we're supposed to look up to for in these dark times of AI clouds forming on the horizon. They don't know what to do. Look at take the top 20 cybersecurity vendors. All of them have been hacked in the last 12 months. So they don't know any deep dark secrets, and I'm assuming they're using their own product. But every single one of these big guys have been hacked. They're struggling with the same problems we are. We follow them like they're shepherds, but they're just as lost as we are. They're just sheep, just like us. And we go to them for answers, and we buy stuff, and their systems are getting hacked just like us. So I don't look to them for AI leadership. Oh, of course they are. Yeah. But that's what we tell our vendors who are our customers who are about to make a big expenditure. We say, stop, go to Google, type in that vendor and see if they've been hacked in the last 12 months. And then pick up the phone, call your sales rep and say, excuse me, don't you use your own product, the one I'm about to buy, and make a huge 6-figure investment in, because either it doesn't work or it's just something you're not telling me. But this is absent, this kind of accountability, this kind of connecting the dots in our industry. And anyway, my point is, I don't expect any of the big cybersecurity names to be leaders in AI security, because they got too much an investment in the present and the past. And like you said, the most optimistic view would be that top 5 to 10 technology leaders like Apple and Google get in the game and proactively start protecting end consumers, which would be better than nothing, but doesn't leave us free of nation state. And the Instagram thing is still doesn't sink in on us. We don't understand what's at stake, how valuable our data is. And, shame on us, because at the end of the day, JC, what the frustration you hear in my voice is that I've been doing this for my whole lifetime, my whole professional life. And I go to a business and they see it as protecting ones and zeros. This is the cybersecurity is about protecting computer data. That's ones and zeros on them. No, this is data about people's lives. This is data about someone's mother or father, your kids, your blood type, your race, your religion. It is very sensitive data to us, and yet we don't give it 2 thoughts. It's just ones and zeros when it's online. And the sad fact is, in the last, I think, 7 years, we have lost over 21 billion personnel records. That's almost 3 times the number of people walking around on the face of this planet. How can we lose more than that? And yet we do. Look at these breaches. Yahoo, 3 billion. Yahoo still got 3 billion users. Good for them.
They have 3 billion records, not users.
Yeah, 3. Good point. Big
but difference.
I mean, these breaches are staggering. And it's a poor reflection that we're not getting the job done. And the leaders that we look to get the job done are struggling with it ourselves. I'm not optimistic, and I don't want to leave you on a pessimistic note. And I think you're right to think this is going to take some leadership. Somebody's got to step up and point the way. But until then, we're in for a rough ride.
Yeah, and I this is one of those topics I could talk for hours about. We don't have hours, so I'm going to wrap it up here with us here. And normally for the audience, I always ask that question, for be the future of biz tech, but this entire conversation was the future, right? Everything about what we talked about was looking at the future of this. Listen, I'm so glad that you were able to come on. And for anyone else listening out there, again, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, preferably with some of that cool comments behind it, so other techies like us can find it and enjoy learning about all the amazing and helpful B2B softwares and consultancies like Richard's out there. Richard, where can people find you specifically if they want to reach out? And then also, where can they find Risk Crew if they want to sit down and have a real sober conversation about ways that they can help themselves?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. When I want to be found, that's where you find me. Otherwise, take a look at Risk Crew. It's just riskcrew.com, all one word, and you get an idea. Also, there's a lot of what we've been talking about. We do a lot of white papers and things at positioning and strategy and things to think about when you're putting together a security strategy for your business. So it's all there, and it's all along the lines of what we've been talking tonight. JC, thanks. I really enjoyed it. Thanks again for the opportunity. Love your podcast. Keep up the good work. Keep up the fight.
Awesome.